webinar titled Integrating Gender Perspectives into Water and Climate Change Initiatives in Central Asia, with a particular emphasis on Uzbekistan. So to provide a brief overview, the IBC on Environment and Climate Change was established 5 years ago with the mission of supporting member states in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Our key objectives include promoting the implementation of the Paris Agreement and other significant multilateral environmental agreements, as well as offering vital support to the United Nations country teams on environmental and climate change issues. So for today's webinar, it was developed in response to a request from the country team in Uzbekistan, seeking assistance in mapping the impact of environmental and climate change on women in Central Asia, again with a focus on Uzbekistan. So through the consultations prior to the webinar, we identified the key focus area to be the nexus of water, gender and climate change. And this relates between SDG 5, 6 and 13. So as for today, we'll discuss how to integrate gender equality and gender transformative approaches into policies and programs related to water and climate, fostering a meaningful dialogue on joint UN initiatives. So it's vital to raise this awareness about the disproportionate effects of climate change on women and girls, particularly when their access to water resources is threatened by climate change. For women and girls, access to water is about personal safety, privacy and dignity and health. So I encourage all participants to engage actively in this exchange of knowledge, sharing insights and helping us all work together towards a more equitable and sustainable future. And before I conclude my welcoming remarks, I'd just like to extend my gratitude again to fellow IBC members, FAO, ILO, UNESCO, UNDRR and UN Women for their contributions today. And lastly, I'd like to thank our colleagues from the UN country team in Uzbekistan for placing your trust in the IBC to deliver this webinar. Okay, so let's dive into the discussions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. I'll just introduce myself quickly as well, as I'll be moderating this session for you. My name is Elena Osipova. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Спасибо большое. Добрый день, добрый вечер. I'll pass now the floor to Sabine Machel, the resident coordinator in Uzbekistan, for some welcome remarks, and then we'll move to the session with the presentations. Sabine, if
Thank you. Yes, I think it's working now. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Matthew, for starting us off. And thank you to the IBC, to really very quickly turn around for this specific webinar for us today. Really happy to see all of you. It's also great because we are meeting while also the COP is in full swing, right? In Baku, not so far from here, where they're also discussing a lot of the important issues when it comes to climate change, of course. And I hope that maybe today as well, we can really focus in on the specific role of women, not only looking at their vulnerabilities, but also of how they can actually drive some of the change and how they can be really the drivers of development also here in Central Asia, in particular, also in Uzbekistan. And I wanted to let you know as well, we have just concluded our common country analysis. I have sent it off to GUI just yesterday for the peer support group. Maybe some of you are also in the peer support group for our CCA. I think it's quite a good document. We have done it in-house and we have only had our colleagues from the country team that has worked on it. So I think this is also an area where we have really identified a number of the different areas where gender equality and other challenges of how this is all coming together. Among this also as our webinar today, really seeing how we integrate these gender perspectives into all these climate change initiatives. So thank you very much for having this opportunity today. I'm very much looking forward to see how we together can actually empower women here in Uzbekistan as agents of change for our work. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Sabine, and thanks again for the initiative for this interesting request. I think we were all quite excited to see this important topic highlighted and to see how we can respond from our side. So just in terms of the program, we'll have 5 presentations today. Many thanks again to all the speakers from our fellow agencies who will be sharing their experience, case studies, and approaches in general in this topic. We'll have about 10-15 minutes per presentation. So depending on how it goes with the time, we'll have some time maybe for a quick question for each presenter. And then also hopefully some time at the end for discussion, because we're also hoping to see that we just not just deliver this webinar, but that we keep this momentum and see how we can maybe further engage in similar discussions on this topic on gender, climate change, and water across the region or in other fora and so on. So with that, I'll give the floor to our first speaker, Natalia Ostojic from UN Women. If you can share your presentation and
good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, Elena, and thank you for this opportunity. Just a second. Can you see it?
It's coming up, I think. Yes, we can see it. Maybe just go to the presenter mode.
Yes, I'm just take some time. Yeah, okay, good.
Perfect. Yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again, and I would first of all like to thank you, the IBC, for actually organizing this webinar and for inviting UN Women to present. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward also to listening to other colleagues' insights and strategies that can drive meaningful change, not only in Uzbekistan, but broader in the region of Central Asia. My name is Natalia Ostojic, and I'm a technical project analyst within UN Women Serbia office, currently on a mission within the regional office in Istanbul. And without further ado, I would like to just couple of introductory remarks on UN Women, as UN Women is currently actually building and strengthening its presence in Uzbekistan. So it's, of course, as most of you know, one of the United Nations entity which is dedicated to gender equality. And besides focusing on these 4 strategic priorities that you can see on the slides, such as political participation and women in decision-making, economic empowerment, life free of violence, and then, of course, women contributing to sustainable peace and resilience. UN Women is also coordinating and promoting UN system-wide work in advancing gender equality, and in all deliberations and agreements linked to the 2030 agenda. One of the key questions that I would like all of us to be reminded is, what is gender equality? And then apart from the OECD definition of gender equality, I would just like to reiterate that gender equality also means that, all genders have equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. And it implies that individuals are free to pursue any career, lifestyle, and ambition without facing discrimination based on their gender. This concept encompasses various aspects of life, including economic participation, decision-making, and valuing different behaviors and needs equally. Achieving gender equality involves addressing systematic barriers and biases that have historically favored one gender over other. And that also includes closing the gender pay gap, ensuring equal representation in leadership roles, which is particularly important, I would say, in this area of climate change and water management, and of course, eliminating gender-based violence and discrimination. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you still, yes.
I apologize, my laptop froze, so I was not able to change the slides. So next to the gender equality, an important term and actually a tool is gender mainstreaming. Gender mainstreaming is a strategy that we all use to achieve gender equality by integrating actually gender perspective in all stages of policy making, from planning to design to implementation and evaluation. And this is very important because in our experience in the Western Balkan region specifically, we have often seen that gender is integrated in the phase of planning and designing any initiative or project related to climate change, water management, environments in a broader term. But when it comes to actual implementation and then follow-up and finally, evaluation of how this initiative actually contributed to achieving gender equality or improve the lives of women and men equally, we do not have, that systematic approach when it comes to other cycles of project implementation. The concept was, by the way, first introduced back almost 40 years ago in 1985 at Nairobi World Conference on Women, and was further developed in 1995 at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, which next year marks 30 years. Today, I would also like to mention that gender mainstreaming faces several challenges, and some of the key challenges that we do face and that we see across the region as resistance to change, that many stakeholders actually resist gender mainstreaming efforts, believing that they are unnecessary. We also have insufficient data. There is a lack of disaggregated data and gender-specific indicators that can hinder the monitoring and evaluation of gender mainstreaming initiatives. And finally, limited resources, because without adequate financial and human resources, dedicated gender mainstreaming cannot be achieved, including the progress. When actually speaking about the continuum of how we see different policies and initiatives when it comes to gender, there is an important aim that we should all be looking to, and that is to make all policies and initiatives transformative as much as possible. That's the right, on the right, you can see the transformative initiatives and actions that can be considered as such. And those actually aim at changing existing gender relationships and are most useful where gender stereotypes are most prominent. For example, example of these initiatives would be for scholarships for young men in typical female sectors, or incentives for fathers to take childcare leave, and so on. On the other hand, we want to avoid, of course, having negative policies, negative gender policies that actually, in a way, ban girls, for example, from attending schools, or that we can currently see in Afghanistan, and actually that leads to negative effects for both women and men. Some key facts and figures that we should all, have in mind and that are a bit staggering. As of latest data, 78 countries that have laws or policies that specifically mention women's participation in water and sanitation management. This also represents a significant increase because only in 2016 it was 35 countries. So there is a progress, but still more work ahead of all of us to increase the number of countries that have laws or policies, with specifically mentioning women's participation in management. Women make about 80% of the total paid workforce in the water sector. When it comes to research and decision-making, this is a bit higher. 23% of engineers and managers in water utilities are women, but still not sufficient. We can all agree on that, I hope. 61% of countries support women's participation in natural resource management as a matter of policy. However, less than half of these provide targeted support to enable participation in practice, clearly illustrating the gap between policy and implementation. And this is something that we often see. And when we speak about gender equality and empowering women, that in many countries across the globe and in the region have good strategic frameworks, policies in place. However, when it comes to implementation, there is a certain gap because all of these policies and frameworks are not being fully implemented. Women and girls are responsible for fetching water in 7 out of 10 households without supplies on premises. According to the first in-depth analysis of gender inequalities in drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene in households. This is data from last year. And then 1 million deaths each year are associated with unclean births. Infections account for 26% of neonatal deaths and 11% of maternal mortality. While supplying almost half of all agricultural labor in low and middle income countries, women's agricultural productivity is on average 20 to 30% lower than male farmers. This disparity is largely to unequal access to resources such as land, credit, and technology, of course, as well as the additional burden of unpaid domestic work that is mostly on women. And this is the most staggering, actually, data that's, for me at least, that women and girls around the world spend a staggering 200 million hours every day collecting water. 200 million hours is actually 8.3 million days, or 22,800 years. So this would, in a more picturesque example, it would mean that if a woman started with her empty buckets in Stone Age, she didn't arrive home with water until 2016. So this is, just to think of how much the world and all of the civilization has advanced in that time, and how much actually women could have achieved in that time if they have not had this burden. When it comes to gender mainstreaming checklists for sustainable programming ideas, there are several things that have already been mentioned in introductory remarks, but women are disproportionately vulnerable to the effects of natural disasters and climate change, and we should always have that in mind. And this is specifically a case where their rights and socioeconomic status is not equal to those of men, and where they have less voice, of course, and influence in shaping policies, and actually where they are not sitting at a table where decisions are being made. Empowerment of women is an important ingredient in building climate resilience. And of course, without safe drinking water, adequate sanitation and hygiene facilities at home and in places of work and education, it is disproportionately harder for women and girls to lead safe, productive, and healthy lives. To meet the climate change, we need to act now. Securing water for communities, economies, and ecosystems is critical for poverty reduction, green energy transformation, and creating a buffer from natural disasters. Climate policy must address water across all sectors of the economy and the environment to ensure a climate resilient and sustainable future for all. Second, it is essential, as essential components of successful climate mitigation and adaptation strategy, we see improved water management and including sanitation. Water is also key to attaining the goals, of course, and targets of 2030 agenda. As the countries begin to review and implement their national plans in the context of different climate agreements, there is a unique opportunity to improve, actually enhance water management practice in ways that will allow communities, countries, and basins authorities to make confident, risk-informed decisions that can help to increase climate resilience, improve ecosystems' health, and reduce the risk of water-related disasters. Transboundary cooperation is also needed to address climate impacts that cross national boundaries, to avoid maladaptive consequences from a basin perspective, and to harness the potential co-benefits of improved regional cooperation, such as reduced, for example, uncertainty due to exchange of data, peace and stability, enlarged planning space, and shared costs and benefits. And finally, importance, climate finance for water resource management and sanitation supports community climate resilience and job creation at the local level, and helps to improve sustainable development outcomes. So innovative blended finance solutions for water and climate, such as green and blue climate bonds, can help leverage climate investment across the economy. Barriers to increased access to climate finance, such as lack of capacity and lack of institutional coordination, must be urgently addressed. I will not go with this, but I think that these slides will be shared with you. This is a short video, 5-minute video of excellence initiative that has been implemented in Kyrgyzstan by the Women Engaged for a Common Future. And it's implementing the right to water in An-Oston region in Kyrgyzstan. And it's very telling on why we need to have gender mainstreaming in water management. We need also to include gender considerations across thematic areas, including mitigation, adaptation, technology transfer, and financing. It goes without saying. And how to do that? Well, we have several gender mainstreaming tools that can help us actually in achieving this. These include gender statistics, gender analysis, and gender responsive budgeting. Apart from assessing different implications of policy and programs, interventions for women and men from the outset, I would say that gender responsive budgeting is very important, because without resources, there is no initiatives, there is no implementation. And there are several approaches to gender responsive budgeting in climate adaptation investments, for example. And these include integrating gender considerations in budget planning and implementation, conducting gender analysis to identify actually gender-specific needs and constraints, and engaging women and men in decision-making processes from the very beginning of any initiative or a project being implemented. Some of the guiding questions that can help counterparts in actually mainstreaming gender into their initiatives are, what is the context of the proposed project intervention? Who has what in the project area? Who owns land? Who owns resources? Who has income assets? Who does what in the project area, etc. And finally, most importantly, who makes decisions, both in the household and in the community? And finally, who benefits from the project activities and interventions as such? To close with, this is a very useful tool that it is a UNESCO tool, and I'm not sure if the colleagues in later presentations will maybe elaborate on that, but I found it very useful a couple of years ago when we had initiatives in the Western Balkans. This is gender responsive indicators for water assessment and monitoring and reporting. It addresses the SDG 6 and its targets and how it is interlinked with gender equality and SDG 5. Actually, it is a very good tool because it has more than 105 gender responsive indicators in 10 priority topics such as water governance, WASH, knowledge resources, transboundary water management, water for agriculture, water for industry and enterprises, human rights-based water resource management, etc. So a very good tool to actually get, for example, I did pick some of the indicators here that have been relevant in the Western Balkans, and I assume that they are also relevant in the Uzbekistan and Central Asia regions on gender responsive water governance, safe drinking water, sanitation and hygiene, and transboundary water management. And that's it. Hope I stick to the time, and apologies if I did not. And I'm available for any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalia. I think this gives us a very good start with this presentation and the overall picture. And thanks also for highlighting some of the stats and figures. It gives a really good background, and also for mentioning the tools. And we will come to the tools later in the session. Maybe unless there is a very specific question to Natalia, we will move to the next presentation, because I know some of the first speakers might need to leave a bit earlier. But if there's any very specific clarification question, I don't see any hands. Yeah, Donna, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. Very good. Just one question to UN Women. Are there any interventions by UN Women at country level in Uzbekistan that have a focus on climate change, building resilience, natural resource management, or something like this? Or any experience already on that? Because, sorry, maybe I have missed it during presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, for the question. Actually, UN Women, as I did briefly mention at the beginning, is currently building its presence in Uzbekistan. And currently the office is in between, there is just one colleague, Cheren Guresh, who is present in Uzbekistan. And they are building, as I said, building the office, and hopefully in the future there will be specific initiatives dealing with climate and water management. However, I believe that last week they did organize gender responsive budgeting training for government representatives, and I believe also UN colleagues. I'm not quite sure about that, apologies, but I know that the training happened last week, and this is the very first initiative that will continue in the coming months on actually building the capacities of Uzbekistan to work on mainstreaming gender into its budget, which is important also, I believe, in terms of this topic that we are discussing today, because without resources, there is no work, right? No results.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for clarifying. Maybe with that, we'll move to the next presentation. don't know, can you stay with us until when? You were saying you would need to leave, because if you need to leave very soon, maybe we go to your presentation.
I can stay for the time being. Don't worry, Elena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we now give the floor to Tessa, and then we move to FAO. So Tessa Schmedding from UNDR will talk about Sendai Gender Action Plan. Please.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be here today to present the Sendai Framework Gender Action Plan. Let me just quickly share my screen. I hope everyone can see it. Yes, I see nodding. Perfect. So yeah, no, we were again, as I mentioned, very happy to have this opportunity to present the Sendai Framework Action Plan, or Gender Action Plan, as it's of course very linked to the topic that we're discussing in this IBC meeting today on water, climate change, and gender. Seeing as, of course, the 9 out of 10 disasters that are triggered by natural hazards are water-related, whether it's too little or too much. We're also seeing that climate change is exacerbating disasters, with extreme weather events really having doubled over the last 20 years compared to the 20 years before. So, it's very important that we're here and we have. We're talking on this topic and looking also at how we can have gender responsive disaster risk reduction. So without any further ado, I'll give maybe a brief introduction to the Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction. So this is a global roadmap that it was agreed upon to reduce human and economic losses as a direct result of disasters. It is based on 4 priorities and 7 goals, and it also includes guiding principles that integrate the gender perspective and what includes and states that it should be integrated into all policies and practices. Within the Sendai framework, it is also clearly mentioned that it is very important to engage with women as stakeholders as well. So why was this gender action plan developed for the Sendai framework? So there is quite a background to it. So during the 2022 UN Commission for the Status of Women, there was an agreement within the conclusions which called for a gender action plan to be developed for the Sendai framework. And the year after, there was the midterm review of the Sendai framework, in which the political declaration also noted this important work to be followed up. So both of these conclusions also built on the fact of a lot of the academic research that has been going into seeing how gender inequality increases disaster risks and impact. Also, our UN Women colleague had just mentioned the disproportionate impact that disasters can have and climate change can have on women. Also, the Sendai Framework Midterm Review reports and analysis highlighted how gender equality in disaster risk reduction is a priority. And there's also the UN study from 2021, which found that the UN systems need to support gender equality within disaster risk reduction. So how was this Sendai Gender Action Plan developed? It was developed with 3 different UN agencies at the lead, with UNDRR, UNFPA, and UN Women. And throughout 2023, following the midterm review of the Sendai framework, 3 entities convened a multi-stakeholder consultation. So this was done in 3 different sets. So the countries were invited to nominate focal points, and a series of online meetings were convened for them. Then there was also a separate series of meetings held for stakeholders to also consult with them. And within the UN system, consultations were also held with entities that implement the internal UN plan for action on DRR for resilience. So more specifically, there were 3 rounds of online consultations and written submissions within all of the regions of the globe. And there was a final written review in February of 2024 of this year. And 77 countries nominated focal points, of which 65 countries attended the consultations or made written comments and remarks to these consultation rounds. And also very importantly, over 500 non-state stakeholders were engaged with the development of the Sendai Gender Action Plan. So following all of these consultations at the CSW of this year, on the 18th of March, the Gender Action Plan to support the implementation of the Sendai framework was launched. So that is the big official title of our Sendai Gap, which we have usually used by its abbreviated name, as it is quite a mouthful. So what is the goal of this Sendai Gap? The goal is really to accelerate the achievement of the Sendai framework goals and outcomes and guiding principles and priorities, as well as targets, by substantially increasing resource allocation, activities, and impacts of gender responsive disaster risk reduction, as well as substantially decrease gender-related disaster risk by 2030. So these are the main goals of the Sendai Gender Action Plan. To give you a bit of an overview what this means, so there are four priorities of the Sendai framework, as I had mentioned before, and the objectives of the Sendai Gender Action Plan are structured around these four objectives. The first one being understanding disaster risk, then there's strengthening disaster risk governance, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, building back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So I could go through all of the key objectives. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I'll rush through them quickly. So within the understanding risk priority, there are two key objectives that are linked to it, which is really increasing the availability of sex, age, income, and disability disaggregated data and qualitative information on gender and disaster risk. The second key objective under this priority is the use of gender analysis to regenerate and apply disaster risk knowledge in decision-making. So then on the second priority, which is on strengthening disaster risk governance, the two key objectives that are falling within this framework is one, mainstream gender equality across laws, policies, strategies, plans, and institutions for disaster risk reduction, informed by relevant international treaties and agreements. And the second one is to increase meaningful participation and empowerment of women and gender stakeholders in disaster risk governance. Under the third pillar, there are also two objectives, which are the mainstreaming of gender equality criteria into risk-informed development and disaster risk reduction investments, and the increase of funding allocation and improved access to financing for disaster risk reduction initiatives that advance gender equality. And then lastly, under the priority area number 4, there are 3 objectives. The first one is the implementation of gender responsive and inclusive end-to-end multi-hazard early warning systems and anticipatory action. Secondly, the plan for and invest in gender responsive disaster recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. And then lastly, the last objective of the 9 key objectives of the Sendai Framework Gender Action Plan is to ensure access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, and prevention and response to gender-based violence in the context of disasters. So just to inform on where this is going. So we have the gender action plan of the Sendai Framework, and of course, what do we do with it? Is there reporting, monitoring, or evaluation? So there are within the development of the Sendai Framework Gender Action Plan, it is foreseen for there to be a light touch global reporting, which consists of the use of global indicators by governments that they are including in the Sendai Framework Monitor. and then as well as the reporting by non-government stakeholders through the Sendai Framework Voluntary Commitments platform. So to support the implementation of these custom indicators, to support the reporting of governments to the Sendai Framework Monitor, which is something that countries already report on. There are a set of indicators that are being developed to support this action. And they're being developed also for use in regional and country plans. At the moment, they are being piloted. So there's a piloting phase that has just been launched and which will run up to the global platform on disaster risk reduction, which will be taking place in, it's June of 2025. So this will be really a first step to see if there will be any tweaking needed to support the indicator work that countries are going to be implementing with their Sendai Framework Monitor exercise. And in general, there will be a review of the Sendai Gender Action Plan, which is proposed to coincide with the final review of the Sendai Framework, which is to happen before 2013. So this is an overview of the reports and then of the gender action plan of the Sendai Framework in its implementation within the next steps, and also of course there is the point that I would really like to stress is that everyone can support with the implementation of the Sendai Gender Action Plan. These 9 key objectives are things that we're all working on as well, and is something that we can work with our governments and stakeholder counterparts to support the implementation of. This is, yes, so I hope that you have a good idea of this snapshot. Also would like to stress again the great collaboration with UN Women and UNFPA in the development of the whole gender action plan for the Sendai framework. And there is a link, and the slides will be shared, in which you can find more information if you have anything more that you would like to know on this. And of course, I'm available for questions. So I think that is it on my side. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tessa. Very good presentation as well. Again, some information about global initiatives that exist on this topic. Maybe any quick questions to Tessa from anybody? Yes, we have Oscar. Yeah.
Yes, Elena, thank you very much. And Tessa, thank you so much for the presentation. Just a quick question regarding the reporting mechanism. You mentioned that it's possible for non-governmental stakeholders to report back to the, as part of the voluntary commitment platforms, as far as I understand. I think this is a very important kind of channel for at least for the NGOs and stakeholders and also workers and employers organizations to report on the critical areas. But I'm wondering how you disseminate this information among the partners so that they are aware of such monitoring mechanisms so that they can easily contribute, let's say. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much for your question, and yes, absolutely, it's a very important tool and something that we can really that is important to be also used and advances to be reported on. So what we have a special stakeholder engagement mechanism in which we engage with a wide range of stakeholders, and through this mechanism we disseminate, of course, the information on this. And then, as I mentioned before, also we are partnering with UN Women and UNFPA on this, and they also reach out to their stakeholders through this. And hence also my last slide is, if you do know of other stakeholders who may not be included within this this outreach, please do spread the word and inform them, because of course any bit of work within this field deserves to have the spotlight shone on it through being reported on this the voluntary platform. So yeah, thank you if you would like to share this with those who you know.
Thanks, and thanks for the question. We have also one in the chat from Nick. Maybe I'll read it for you then. Okay, because he says he's in an open office. Do you expect much of a take up of single gap indicator in Europe and Central Asia? I'd be interested in such an indicator to include in a pan-European environmental assessment in about 2026.
So the indicators, so it's about 33 indicators that have been developed to really support the member states with their implementation of or reporting to the Sendai Framework Monitor. So this is what the indicators are for, to really support this already engaged mechanism of the Sendai Framework Monitor. We didn't want to create something new in addition, because we know that, of course, member states have already a number of reporting commitments, and we wanted to make sure that this was this add-on. So there are already a number of countries within Europe and Central Asia that are reporting to the Sendai Framework Monitor. And once this, also the pilot phase has been properly established, it will also be easier to then provide this guidance through the indicators to also report to the Sendai Gender Action Plan and that part of the Sendai Framework Monitor on the gender responsive disaster risk reduction work. Sorry, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Thanks. Nick seems to be happy.
Okay, great.
Okay. Very good. I think we'll maybe move to the next presentation. And as I said, we'll hopefully have some time in the end also for some brainstorming. So we'll move now to Dono from FAO, because we've had to move a bit the presentations. Dono, I will then start your presentation from my side, and then you tell me when to share slides.
Yes.
And yeah, just give me a second.
Please do. Thank you very much.
And we're moving now a bit more to the part where we have examples of country level work or specific tools. So I'm very happy to have these presentations as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Yelena. Can I start?
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Can you go to the first slide, please?
Oh, sorry, it was open somehow. Yeah, here we go.
Yes, thank you very much. So, as was already mentioned, I represent FAO at this meeting. I've been for almost 10 years part of the IBC on gender. Very pleased to meet now colleagues in the IBC dedicated to environmental issues. As a regional gender and social protection advisor, I am working with FAO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia based in Budapest, Hungary. We have 53 member states that are governing our work with one collective member, EU, but our program activities are in 18 countries, 18 territories and countries. My presentation is focused more on how-to aspect, because my understanding was that as an IBC environment, we will be addressing country team and country office staff, those who are involved in the project formulation and implementation. That's why I'm not stopping much on FAO's commitments. With these UN specialized agencies, of course, we fully integrate in our work. We're supposed to fully integrate in our work all common principles of gender mainstreaming, as was already outlined in earlier presentation. The organization has its corporate gender equality policy with all minimum standards, and at regional level we also have a gender action plan, and all commitments we report. Every 2 years we report to European Commission on Agriculture on what we do. And if we move to next slide, when we see how agriculture is interrelated with climate change, it explains why in our work, in everything that we do, we consider not only gender equality as a cross-cutting theme, but also climate change is an important cross-cutting theme for FAO. And when it comes to agriculture, and can we move to next slide? Yeah, did we? Oh, yes, no, sorry, back, second, yeah, back, yes, this one. So, by the way, all the photos that are taken for this presentation, they are with credits, and they come from either Uzbekistan or from neighboring countries of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. They are all taken in the field where FAO has its interventions. So when it comes to Uzbekistan and also other Central Asian states, agriculture and rural sector play a very important role. It is important for sustainable poverty reduction. It's important for nutrition and food security, but also national economic growth. In Uzbekistan, it also contributes a significant share of GDP, and almost as much in Tajikistan. In Kyrgyzstan also numbers are very high. It's a very important source of employment for rural population, and more for women even than for men. But climate change threatens agricultural productivity and food security, especially through its impact on water scarcity. Because through increased water scarcity, it impacts yields, which is very relevant for drought-prone areas of Uzbekistan, but also neighboring countries. And this leads to vulnerability of overall food security, because agriculture, climate change, and the climate change situation exacerbate food prices that are precious. And in this situation, lower income people are seen to be most affected, because usually food and non-alcoholic beverages account for a significant share of total expenditure in poor households. So that's very briefly about this connection and this link. And I would like also to say a few words when it comes to status of rural women in Uzbekistan and Central Asia and the challenges they encounter. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So here I would like to refer to two data sources that might be useful for our colleagues and stakeholders. First of all, FAO released, perhaps you've heard about it already, released in 11 years, it's a global report on the status of women in agri-food systems, and it covers all continents, all regions, including Europe and Central Asia. And more specifically for Uzbekistan, we have country gender assessment, gender, agriculture, and rural development in Uzbekistan. It is for FAO must do in each and every country where we have program. We produce country gender assessment involving gender expertise, involving our national counterparts. This one for Uzbekistan was published in 2018, 2019. And given reforms and big changes that took place in the country over the last 4 or 5 years, we are working on an updated version, which we recently shared with UNCT for the feedback. And we are planning very soon, in 2-3 weeks, maybe a round table in Tashkent, where we discuss with our national counterparts and validate the updated version of this report. So many issues that I am talking here about, they come from these 2 sources of information. So major issues were already mentioned by some colleagues, but I would like to reiterate, because this very much defines vulnerability of rural women. First of all, who are rural women, who are women farmers also? These are big questions. Women do contribute in Uzbekistan, as in other states, to all stages of the agribusiness value chains, from the work in the field to the sale, processing and consumption of products. Nevertheless, according to that sources, to that reports and data and analysis they conducted, their jobs continue to be more precarious. Their working conditions are likely to be worse than men's, and they continue to be overrepresented in seasonal, informal, part-time, low-wage work, with a limited access to social protection. When it comes to farms ownership, it's very interesting. In Uzbekistan, this figure, if we refer to some official also resources, it varies from 7 to 9%. On average in the region, approximately 30% of farms, if you take European Union, for example, are supervised by women. But that is the indicator that demonstrates women's access to resources. Women often work in agriculture as contributing family workers, and they are likely to receive less remuneration, and they might be often overlooked as such from agricultural projects, but also from other decision-making processes, because they have this limited access to and limited power. One of the reasons when it comes to Uzbekistan, but also to all other countries, it's of course social practices. We say also social norms, but when we say social norms, it comes like something normal, but that's why I avoid using it. I prefer to say social practices. They demand women to be responsible for domestic responsibilities, especially in rural areas. They also work on family farms, plots, and given also physical and social infrastructure. I think in UN Women's reports, there was a reference to global indicators, but when it comes also to Uzbekistan, there was recently, UNICEF conducted recently MIGS, and all this data, it shows that it can be really posing big challenge to women. And these social practices are also expressed not only in double or triple burden of unpaid domestic and care work. It's also negative attitudes toward women's paid work outside their homes. It's limited freedom of movement, which further restricts women's agency, decision-making power, and leads to discrimination and gender inequalities. And this has a significant impact on their access to knowledge, on their access to capacity building opportunities, trainings that FAO is also conducting at country level in various technical issues. And that's crucial for mitigating the effects of climate change. And this creates barriers that hinder their empowerment, their active participation in various aspects of agricultural development. So these factors need to be taken into account. These issues like unpaid care and domestic work, it exacerbates their time poverty, limits time they can dedicate to learning, to investing in income generating activities, or taking any leadership positions. So that's why when it comes to climate change related decision makings and benefits from climate change finance, we often see male dominated pictures and much less women. And this is happening not because they are not interested, but because of the structural barriers that I quickly mentioned here. So can we move to next slide, please? When it comes to important aspect of gender and climate change, we need to keep in mind, first of all, that climate change, it's even worsens existing gender-based inequalities because it keeps women impoverished and marginalized. In fact, women working in the agricultural sector are at risk of double gender discrimination because of agriculture as a sector most affected by the negative effects of climate change, but because also they are women and they are agricultural workers. So can we move to next slide, please? Yeah, I would not maybe stop here because it is about frameworks already discussed. So yes, how we address the issues, I think that's more important for us to focus on. How to is an important aspect of our work when it comes to practicalities, when it comes to our practice at country level. We can advance gender equality through climate change mitigation and adaptation actions by increasing adaptive capacity of women, addressing their economic empowerment, but also minimizing social and gender-related risks in all our interventions and investments. To achieve that, we need, of course, strengthened policy commitment and action. We need advocacy, we need community awareness, but we also need very concrete measures that we implement across 4 dimensions. It's increasing women's decision-making ability, ensuring diverse women participate in it at all levels. It is increasing their access to resources, providing women with access to and supporting their use of resources. This includes also climate smart information. This includes technology, but of course at large this includes livelihood, incomes and credits. Supporting their collective action, reducing their work burdens, but also I think without that the work would be incomplete. Engaging men, empowering women means also working with men, making them gender aware also, making them also more sensitive and more responsive to the need to address these issues at decision making at all levels, but also in the process of implementing various interventions that would enable better adaptation and mitigation. And gender mainstreaming at work starts with gender analysis. Can be, yes, thank you very much. In this sense, of course, this picture is oversimplified way to show vulnerability to climate change. But what is most important is to stop seeing homogeneous categories, whether we are talking about smallholder farmers or seasonal workers, low-paid agricultural workers. We always need to apply intersecting forms of inequality, intersectionality. It may take multiple forms, but besides the question of who is vulnerable, we should ask what are the aspects that are related to gender as a starting point for in-depth understanding how this is all interlinked with an age, with remoteness, with ethnicity or other variables they may overlap with. So that's how we should look at gender analysis as questions where we start asking who is excluded from services, benefits, and power, but even more importantly, why. Actually, it's one of the lessons learned in FAO's experiences across the region. We tend to report numerically in a quantitative manner on whom we usually reach as beneficiaries. And we end up saying that, okay, we had as many women as many men, but usually these figures, unless the project is gender specific, show much lower rates of women due to the reasons I described above. That's why we have to ask why, and we have to address the findings that we reveal in the process of that analysis. I can bring examples if we have time for discussion, but I would like to move to next slide to bring cases of FAO interventions in Uzbekistan. There are many, program portfolio is very big. There are many projects that are taking place in the countries, and FAO has been around already for quite a few years. But I would like to bring 3 examples of interventions, one at policy level, one at meso level, and one at grassroots level.
Maybe just, sorry to interrupt, if we can, wrap up then in some minutes. Yeah, okay, very good.
Almost the last slide, if, yeah, I think so. Okay, at policy level, we have project for sustainable forest management that work with the State Committee on Forestry, helping them to address the needs of forest-dependent communities by analyzing value chain, finding women's involvement in income-generating activities that were linked with the non-timber products, providing them with alternate income generation opportunities by training on that, and at the same time working with the policy level to ensure that decision makers are aware. And this work led to a formulation of a strategy, gender mainstreaming strategy, which was adopted by the State Committee on Forestry. Currently, this committee is merged by the Ministry of environmental protection and climate change. But to my knowledge, they consider now expanding the strategy for the whole ministry. There is a specific center created on gender and climate change, and the work is ongoing. So the work started a few years ago in this area is in the process of continued. At measure level, we focus on extension and rural advisory services because they are the ones who provide knowledge and access to technical skills to farmers. And we think it's very important to have a specific targeted activities that facilitate access to extension and knowledge for rural women. And finally, at grassroots level, there are a number of initiatives ongoing in different parts of Uzbekistan. For the purpose of time and space, I didn't list them all. They support smallholders and family farms in access to drip irrigation, and the connection with water management and water scarcity is obvious here. So that's one of the direction where FAO has a particular experience distributing equipment, but also providing training, specific training and opportunities for better knowledge. And finally, sharing this information, I concluded this by a slide that the last one in this presentation. Sorry, we can omit it because it is a guide. Yeah, can we go back actually? This guide was developed and released last year, and it might be of interest to the IBC environment because it's practical guide for gender mainstreaming released by FAO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia to support various stakeholders. And it's bringing lessons learned from FAO experience with Green Climate Fund and Global Environmental Facility in the region. It collects 6 good practices from Europe and Central Asia. It's available online. You can easily Google it. So please be aware, everything what I have not said is there. And last slide, if we may go, it is about steps to consider for gender mainstreaming, which is very simplified scheme. We have so many tools. I cannot list them all, but that is the essence that we usually advise to project formulators on the ground to follow up. So that's very briefly from FAO, how FAO considers and what FAO is doing. I will be very happy to respond to questions if there are any.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Donald. Maybe if there's a very quick question, otherwise maybe we move to the next presentation and have some time for discussions. Okay, but very good to see, I think, the examples from country level work that FAO are doing in Uzbekistan. I think this brings us now closer to the practical aspects that we also wanted to discuss in this webinar. So very good to have that. And then continuing with the practical aspects, I think we mentioned in the beginning that we'll also look into some tools and approaches. So with that, I would like to give the floor to my colleagues from UNESCO, from the WAP program. Laura and Martina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Helena. And it is a big pleasure to be sharing today these experiences, and also, of course, to always find synergies and that we are sharing concepts, what is great. And I think we need to do more of these activities. So thank you very much for organizing this. And so today we want to share some very practical tools that were also mentioned before about our work at the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program. I'm leading the water and gender activities. I'm a senior Water and Gender Program Specialist at WAP, and I will be sharing the presentation with my colleague Martina Fabili. She supports in the gender team and also in publications and all what deals with integrating gender across publications. So you may have heard about the work of UNESCO World Water Assessment Program as the producers of the flagship report on fresh water, the World Water Development Report that is published on behalf of UN Water and partners. So every year there is a different topic. This year the report was about water for prosperity and peace, and there has been since 2003 different volumes, and next year we will be discussing about a very important topic that is mountains, water and glaciers. And in 2026, and I wanted to bring this today, the topic will be on water and gender. So this will be of particular interest for all of us. So I invite you to be joining us, and we will keep you updated on how this move forward. And another a key part of what we are doing at UNESCO World Water Assessment Program is precisely the water and gender component. During the last 10 years, WAP has been developing methodologies, training programs, advocacy for integrating gender perspective into the water work. And we have organized our work in 4 key pillars. One, as mentioned, the development and application of gender indicators, methodologies, tools for precisely collecting disaggregated data, conducting gender analysis, and the use of gender responsive indicators. So Natasha was mentioning before the WAP toolkit, and we will go into some more details in a minute, and Martina will refer to that. We complement with the design and implementation of related capacity development programs that we developed targeting different needs of different groups. And we also design and implement projects on the ground. And we have a quite active area of advocacy. And in the QR code on the screen, you can also access all the information, and also on our website. And there has been already mentions to the different aspects that answer the question of why it is important to have a focus on women when we discuss about water, about climate, vulnerabilities. So I will just go briefly here because there has been all these insights before. I would like to refer to these close interconnections between the topics of water, climate, and gender. And we are all aware, and we have been discussing before, that we are living times of unprecedented water and climate crisis. So increasing consumption is raising the demand for water, while climate change is negatively affecting its supply. Also, climate extremes, climate change triggered drought and floods that put food security and people's livelihoods in danger. The impacts of climate change are mostly felt by groups that live under already vulnerable conditions. And in many communities, these water challenges and water security related livelihood problems are exacerbated by compound effects of climate and hydrology and culture, and the socio-economic aspect of this. So vulnerability can be a factor of geographical location, ethnicity, disabilities, class, and gender. And this is why it's so important that we are discussing today. But also, I wanted to mention that that it's there has been, in addition to making visible all the gender inequalities in water, there is also progress thanks to women driving this positive change. So in the last years, efforts to mainstream a gender perspective, as we have heard before, has made these inequalities and the possible solutions more visible in international frameworks, in different approaches to include and to integrate gender into our climate and water work. A great part of these efforts, as said, has been thanks to the leadership of many, many women who are playing a crucial role in driving this change. As an example, I wanted to share this network of women in water diplomacy with all the work that they are doing, but also the different information and leadership that women, including in Central Asia, are today doing towards this common goal. Coming to the heart of our work in water and gender at UNESCO WAP, we focus strongly on data for gender equality. And we know, and it has been mentioned before, the lack of sex-disaggregated water data is one of the major obstacles for the production of evidence to make decisions, to inform policies, for designing projects, and all the different aspects that has been also mentioned. So having accurate analytical methods and tools, need of disaggregated data to better understand what is going on within the different groups of stakeholders. We are not homogeneous groups. And this is something that really needs to be shown through data to better understand the different vulnerabilities, the inequalities, and how we can address them. So in the next slide, I will invite Martina to continue and to refer to this resource that WAP has developed. We call the Toolkit for Water and Gender. So Martina, if you want to.
Thank you, Laura.
Join
yes,
and share.
Let's go ahead. So filling the sex disaggregated water data gap is one of the main objectives of WAP. Indeed, in line with the UNESCO priority gender equality, we have been pioneers in the development of methodologies for the collection of sex disaggregated water data and in the design of key gender responsive indicators. As a result, in 2015, WAP published the first edition of the Toolkit on sex disaggregated water data. That is the publication that was mentioned in the first presentation. In 2019, an updated edition was released, which is aligned with the 2030 agenda and also incorporates the lessons learned from the field. As you can see, the toolkit consists of 4 tools and includes 105 gender-responsive indicators organized in 10 priority topics, a methodological framework, practical guidelines for data collection through desk research and field surveys, and an updated questionnaire containing 364 questions ready to be used. Next slide, please. Okay. So to foster a wider dissemination, the toolkit has been translated into other languages, as French, Spanish, and Russian. And on this slide, you can see the covers of the Russian edition, which will be launched in the coming months. Next. So as mentioned before, the indicators included in the toolkit are organized in 10 priority topics, such as water governance, water for agricultural uses, migration and climate change. In addition, as you can see in this table, the toolkit highlights the interconnections between each priority topic and the SDGs of the 2030 agenda. Next. Okay, now to understand how the toolkit works, let's consider the indicators for the 4th priority topic, that is transboundary water management. This priority topic contains 8 indicators, which are clustered under 3 different subtopics. So for A, for B, for C, that cover gender aspects and governance mechanisms, programs and projects in the field, and their impact on local communities. It is also important to highlight that these indicators are intended to support the collection of both quantitative and qualitative data and information, as you can see from the example below. Next. So as a flexible tool that can be applicable and relevant in various situations, the toolkit plays a crucial role within the capacity development programs on water and gender that we implement in different regions. For example, since 2020, we have delivered biannual trainings in Western Africa, Central and South America, the Caribbean and Pacific Seas. And of course, we hope to start the next cycle in Central Asia and Eastern Africa. Generally, these programs are aimed at representatives from governments and water institutions who want to better understand the importance of having reliable sex disaggregated water data and strengthening the capacity to use this data to formulate inclusive and sustainable water policies. Concerning the structure of the programs, they're organized in modules and consist of different steps. So at the beginning, introductory webinars are delivered, and then interactive face-to-face workshops are held with all participants. Anyway, the training programs can be adapted to different needs depending on the audience. And now I'll give the floor to my colleague again, who will provide you with some information on specific projects that we have in our advocacy activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martina. And Martina also is our training in Russian languages. So we are very happy to have her on the team. And just a few examples very quick about some of the projects that we implement and how we use all these resources to really close this gap between policy and implementation that was also mentioned before, I think, by Dono. So, for example, we have developed in the last 2 years a project together with the Asian Development Bank that aims to have a comprehensive approach and capacity development, including an aspect of field work with the participants of these training modules that came from 14 of the Pacific Small Island Development States. We developed different activities online and in-person training, and we implemented a field service in one of the islands. So this allowed us to collect data and to support participants and to guide them along this process of using indicators, gender responsive perspective into policy on the ground and with hands-on work. So we will be publishing a volume with all these results by the end of the year. Another important aspect for us is the work on international water projects. At present, our gender work is supporting 2 large projects that are with GEF, one also with FAO, that is enhancing sustainability of transboundary Kimberley-Mekong River Delta aquifers, where UNESCO is supporting and conducting all what relates to groundwater resources analysis and the dependent ecosystems. And from WAP, we do the gender integration across the entire project component. This is a 5-year project with several key partners, and something that has been very interesting from this project is that from the design we were called to develop the entire gender component, taking into consideration the different more water or environmental or climate components. And there has been also a dedicated amount of funding allocated to this. It's very important, as Natalia was saying, we cannot do gender integration without money. This is something that only with a gender focal person, for example, it is expected that this work will be done. And this is not the case. There are many expenses, and it's really important to dedicate sufficient funding. The other example that I wanted to share is that we are also participating through a technical backstopping and capacity development in the Mediterranean program, that is Mediterranean coastal zones, that UNESCO is also a partner with the implementation of good practices and analysis that also relates these coastal aquifers in 8 Mediterranean countries. And from WAP, we are providing support on developing training modules, but also adapting the methodological approach for integrating gender and social inclusion in transboundary waters to the context of this project. Finally, I wanted to share this the wide scale advocacy initiative that we launched in 2021. And I also take the opportunity to invite all of you to join, the ones that are not yet members. That is the goal is to accelerate gender equality in water. This multi-stakeholder effort collects now more than around 30 countries and more than 160 different members from all regions of the world. And when we define this advocacy initiative, all the members at the moment in 2021 agree on these 5 key general recommendations that also condense many of the topics that we have been discussing today, to include gender equal principles in funding, narrow the policy practice gap, foster women's leadership beyond only participation, having a strong effort going to education and capacity development, to counter unjust social norms and stereotypes is still very prevalent in many places, and to collect, analyze, and use sexist aggregated data. So we have been very active in presenting in global events, in the key important water conferences and settings. We have developed an online platform where we are collecting all the information related to the coalition and also the efforts of the members, the project. And of course, I invite you to visit the platform and to join the coalition. And with this, thank you very much. We thank you for your attention and remain available for any question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura and Martina. Maybe if we have one quick question. Oscar, yes, please.
Sorry. Thank you so much, dear colleagues, for the presentation. I have just a very quick question regarding the indicators. You mentioned about your action program, and also you refer to the paid women workers in the water sector as well. I'm wondering if you have a specific indicator regarding the working conditions of women in the water sector.
Well, we have, as Martina was mentioning, more than 100 different indicators in different areas. So in water, what relate, for example, to WASH, we have a set of specific indicators, and some can be used for this purpose, or if not, the word is not exactly as you need. So the nature of the indicators have been designed to be flexible to incorporate these specific needs, and it is of course a very useful and critical aspect, and it can be related not only to WASH but also for water use in agriculture, or for different sectors that are water related. So yes, and we can discuss, and something that is important to for us is that this tool is open source. It has been published by UNESCO. It is in UNESCO repository, so accessible to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Oscar, you actually our next and
yes,
last speaker.
Yeah, it's my turn now. Let me share my presentation. Okay, I hope you will be able to see it in a proper way. So, dear colleagues, mindful of the time, and we have limited time, I'll try to be very brief as much as possible. And just a second, I always get confused with putting it in a slideshow.
We can see it well, I think. Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is much better, even. Okay. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Özge Berberataş. I'm the Gender Equality and Non-Discrimination Specialist of the ILO, International Labour Organization, covering Central Asia and Eastern Europe. And I'm very happy to be part of this very important initiative and discussion. So today I would like to briefly share with you the recent ILO policy guideline on gender equality and inclusion for a just transition in climate action that was drafted last year at the COP28, and it was finalized with the comments from our stakeholders and the constituents. What I mean with the constituents is the member states of the ILO and also workers and employers organizations of the ILO. So, and this is also, we have already covered this area, so I don't need to go into the details, but climate change, in fact, will come some serious challenges on women and girls, but also it will bring some positive, opportunities as well when it comes to the, its impact on the livelihoods, income generation, and also world of work. And according to ILO's estimation, we are expecting over 100 million new jobs to be created in the green jobs. But the main question is that, I mean, this is a very positive side of the climate change, but the main question is that how much women and girls will benefit from those newly created jobs and in green jobs and in green economy. But at the same time, what we know is that 1.2 billion jobs, around 40% of the global labor force, which is a huge amount, in fact, are at serious risk of, due to global warming and also environmental degradation. So the critical question from ILO's perspective, as you know, that ILO is mandated to, regulate the world of work through the international labor standards to achieve the social justice for everyone across the world. So for us, just transition, we always promote the idea of just transition means that greening the economy in a way that is fair and equal to everyone concerned, including men and women, for creating decent job opportunities and also leaving no one behind. But what we know, the reality in the labor market is that women are also at very huge, important risk of being left out in terms of newly jobs to be created in the key industries, which are decarbonization, and also since those sectors are mostly and highly masculinized for many reasons. So our main aim is that, I mean, if you want to have, just transition policies in place, then we need to think about occupational gender segregations in the labor market, and we need to also think about other gender equalities and also decent work deficits in many sectors. We already talk about persistent challenges that women and girls face in the labor market, particularly when it comes to the barriers to education and training, and also gender-based occupational segregation. And speaking about the countries in Central Asia, we still have a list of, banned occupations, for example, for women who cannot really enjoy the same rights, equal opportunities for certain sectors, and also enter into those, jobs as a member of of the society. So we are still facing serious barriers when it comes to the occupational segregation, and also gender gaps in pay, employment, and leadership positions. And also, I mean, we have also mentioned very briefly, women are in our region, Central Asia, but across the world, are mostly dominated in sectors where the disembark deficits are quite high, and these are the sectors that we call them as a kind of sticky floors. They cannot really step up from those sectors where the informality is very high to other sectors where the wages and the working conditions are better. So this is also about the glass ceiling in the labor market as well. And the discrimination, violence, and harassment practices in the labor market also prevents women both for entering into the labor market and also maintaining in the labor market as well. We have talked about affordable care services, which is a main one of the main, in fact, barriers for women to enter into labor market. So I'm not going to go into the details of this slide as well, but I mean, we know that, I mean, for workers transitioning to new jobs need any kind of enabling working environment for them, for gaining new skills and learning new skills, upgrading their skills, and also to be able to access to the newly created jobs in the green economy. But for that, we need to mainstream gender responsive policies into our skills development programs as well. And we are not talking in a kind of vacuum. Of course, we have global frameworks available, the Paris Agreement, and also the ILO's instruments, ILO conventions, the relevant ILO conventions, majority of them have been ratified by the member states in the Central Asia as well. And also there are some ILO guidelines when it comes to the just transition towards environmental sustainable economies and societies. And just recently, also, as I mentioned, as I'm going to go into the details of that, we have also produced a new guideline on gender equality and just transition agenda, and which also in related to this one, we have just recently adopted at the International Labour Conference June this year an ILC resolution, an ILO resolution on decent work in the care economy. And we know that women will not and is not really benefiting from the opportunities that the climate, climate-related responses and the policies and programs. But on the other hand, we know that the countries are also increasingly addressing the impact of climate change on women and girls, and also persistent gender inequalities in our societies and the economies. And one of the main tools for countries to address such important, points in the national framework is the national determined contributions, which is, and for the starting from next year, we are expecting that the countries will start adopting their and also updating their national determined contributions. There are some good signs from looking into the, different aspects of the national contributions, determined contributions. Around 80% of parties provided information on their, gender in their NDCs, which is a good sign. And they are also starting integrating more gender responsive consultations and highlighting the inclusion of national, gender machineries and also women stakeholders into their decisions. And we understand that around 40% of the parties also have some general commitment on gender equality. These are the very positive sides for, let's say, for future. But at the same time, we have still a long way to go, because only 5% of the global parties have a specific criteria for prioritizing activities on gender equality. So when it comes to the, addressing the gender inequalities, maybe in the national policies in place, but when it comes to the actions that, specific programs that prioritize the needs of women and girls, particularly in the labor market, but also in other sectors, are still lacking. So this is the area that we have to work more on, to be able to integrate more gender equality concerns into the national determined contributions. And the guideline, when we look into the guidelines, it is the main aim of the guideline is to I mean, considering the challenges and the opportunities that climate change may also bring, the question is what needs to happen and how. So the guideline, ILO's guideline, is just guide on the gender equality and inclusion for a just transition and climate action, analyzes 9 policy areas for a just transition where ILO identified in their own guidelines as well on just transition. So, and also the guide also therefore seeks to be acknowledged a kind of resource for the constituents, for the governments, for the workers and employers organizations in identifying the potential entry points, and also after having gained some illustrations and also inspirations for what the dynamics between climate change and also climate policies, decent work and the gender equality, and also in what ways we could apply as the members of the global governance, what can be applied in at the country level as an entry point as well. And the main message of the guideline, of course, is that the climate impacts carry the risk of deepening existing inequalities and disembark deficits in the societies, and also that transitioning towards a gender greening economy does not automatically bring the current gender inequalities and does not automatically bring also reducing the gender inequalities in the societies. So in this slide, you see that we have 9 policy areas starting from the macroeconomic and growth policies, which is the main pillar of the, let's say, the policy guide. And also it continues with the industrial sectoral policies, enterprise policies, skills development, occupational health and safety, social protection, active labor market policies, rights, decent work conditions for all workers, social dialogue and tripartism. And all the elements, 9 policy areas within this circle are interconnected and should have a strong gender equality perspective and inclusion perspective as well. So, I mean, I don't want to go into the details of the kind of each element, but what I would like to highlight is that, I mean, without macroeconomic and growth policies, which are gender responsive and gender sensitive, it's not possible to really address the gender inequalities in the labor market, meaning that we need more public investments on climate financing, which is the main issue, in fact, at the COP29 discussion currently in Baku. And we know that now governments are discussing the increase the climate financing at the global level, $1 trillion with the pledges, more pledges from the governments. But the question in here is that how much really women will benefit from such, global, investment and also financing structures, how their needs and the concerns will be really clearly reflected in the global, let's say, financing schemes to be discussed and also agreed by the parties at the COP29. And also, I mean, as you see in here, industrial and sectoral policies have also a very critical role. We discuss, it's what is really obvious that, I mean, we need to have also enterprises to generate new jobs, but also this has to be coupled and also supported by the conducive and industrial and sectoral policies as well. We are discussing about the impact of climate change on agriculture, on transport, and also in construction and energy sectors as well. But in here, I also would like to have a kind of specific reference to the care economy. And our colleague from FAA, Donna, has briefly mentioned about also the role of unpaid care and domestic work in the climate change agenda. And this is, as an ILO, we've been trying to also prioritize this area as part of the climate change discussion and agenda. So the guideline gives also a very specific reference to the investing in the care economy. What we know is that care work is a low carbon industry by nature, and looking into the global healthcare system that represents close to the almost 10% of global GDP, but constitutes only 4.4% of the global net emissions. And also looking into the healthcare and care jobs produce on average 26 times less than less than a manufacturing job, over 20 times less than agriculture, and over time almost 1,500 times less than jobs in the oil and gas sector. So these numbers are quite striking to show that the care economy is a very important sector that we also need to prioritize. And also the care economy is one of the really important job generating sectors as well, particularly for women. And we know that the health sector, the education sector, and the social work sector is very highly feminized, but also suffers a lot from decent work deficits when it comes to the pay equality, when it comes to the working conditions, working hours, also when it comes to the occupational health and safety. So what we need is to really recognize the value, the economic value of unpaid care work into the global GDP and into our societies, in our daily lives. But at the same time, we need to recognize the huge potential of the care economy in terms of job generation. And for that reason, it is also very critical to integrate some aspects when it comes to the national determined contributions so that the biggest added value of unpaid care work and also care work is included in the newly generated and updated national determined contributions as well. And for that, ILO's resolution on decent work and the care economy, I just referred, would be a very good reference point for the countries who will be revising their NDCs as well. And for that, we have also, as an ILO, we have developed 5R framework, which regarding the care economy, the whole care system, which is all about recognizing, reducing, and redistributing the unpaid care work and domestic work, and also awarding the care workers who are endlessly working in those sectors in education, in health and social work, and rewarding their contributions to the whole economy and societies by respecting their labor rights, core labor rights in line with the ILO's convention, and also giving the voice and representation opportunities for those care workers to be able to benefit from the freedom of association, from the collective bargaining rights, as is envisaged by the ILO core conventions on freedom of association and collective bargaining. So this also requires a kind of policy coherence between the care policies when it comes to including the leave policies as well, maternity protection, paternity and parental leave rights as well, and including childcare and long-term services. And also it is also very much connected with the macroeconomic and social protection policies, labor protection policies, and also migration policies as well. And in here, since we are talking about Uzbekistan, I would like to share with you some highlights from the report that we have just recently produced regarding the impact, the positive impact of investing in the care economy in terms of job creation. So, and according to our estimation, investing in the universal child care and long-term care services in Uzbekistan, that could generate around 1 million new jobs by 2030. As I said previously, the care economy is one of the important sectors in terms of job generation. And also at the country level, we see this, very positive results based on our estimations and calculations. And those jobs newly created in Uzbekistan by 2030 will be in childcare services, will be in long-term care services, but also will be in non-care sectors, which will be also providing, inputs to also care sectors directly. And the good thing is that the good news is that 87% of new jobs will go to women in Uzbekistan by 2030, and 96% of them will be formal. I think this is also very important. We are talking about the labor market. We are talking about the access of women into the labor market, but we should never forget about a high persistence level of women in the informal economy, which prevents them to enjoy the labor protection and also social protection as well. So if we want to have more jobs to be created in green economy, then we need to also demand for decent jobs to be created as well. And also, based on our estimation, what we see is that every dollar invested in closing the child policy gap would result at least around $6 of GDP increase by 2030. So every dollar investing in the childcare system will definitely come back with a positive results in the national GDP as well. And we expect that this also will increase not only employment rates, but also this will also impact on reducing gender pay gap in the country as well. There are also thinking about enterprise policies and the occupational and safety and health. These are also one of the also pillars of our guideline for specific and dedicated interventions and the actions. But I don't want to go into the details since we don't have much of time on that. And as a final remarks, I would like to also highlight the importance of engagement of workers and employers organizations into the national and global discussion on climate change and also just transition. Without hearing the voice of also workers and employers, we cannot really develop comprehensive and also sustainable policies and also plans and the programs, neither at the country nor at the global level. And for that also, I mean, what we see looking into the different structures of the workers, trade unions, and employers organizations, unfortunately, women representation in the trade unions and the employers organizations are still lagging behind. And we therefore, I mean, first giving the opportunity to trade unions and the workers to raise their concerns at the global level, but at the same time ensuring the women's engagement into management mechanisms of those trade unions and also employers organizations are of crucial importance for for development of gender responsive policy dialogues together with the workers and employers organizations. And at the same time, it's very important to mainstream gender equality into the agenda of social dialogue, tripartite mechanisms. We know that, for example, in Uzbekistan, we have general tripartite agreement signed by the government, workers and employers organizations, and it is very crucial to engage them more and more into the discussion on when it comes to the climate change and sustainable development as well. And as a final remarks, we know that, I mean, we need to have a whole of government approach to be applied, which also has to be gender responsive. But it is also important to collect national data and also share, I mean, have the access to national data as well, and strengthening the capacities of all partners. And one thing is also very important is the financing. We all mention that just transition also requires adequate financing, and where also we need also gender responsive budgeting arrangements, and also we need to also have a gender responsive focus for all financing sources that is need to be called to the parties and the also relevant stakeholders as well. So I'll stop here, and you can see our guide by using the QR code in here, and this guide has been also translated into Azerbaijani language for the COP29 discussions. And just we are also, as an ILO, we have a pavilion in COP29 just to engage with more stakeholders on promoting the just transition and gender responsive agenda at the COP. And we will have also policy dialogue with the countries from Central Asia, and we will have representatives from the Ministry of Labor, the workers and employers organizations from Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Kazakhstan are coming to COP29 to engage in this policy dialogue, where we will have the opportunity to also discuss the details of just transition and gender responsive agenda. Thank you very much, Elena. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you for this very rich presentation, and to all of you. We are unfortunately running a bit out of time, so I think we'll close here and don't go into questions. So maybe I'll just say a few words about the next steps. So we will, of course, share all the presentations as well as a recording of this video. So I encourage you to share it also with those colleagues who couldn't join us here today. And also thanks, Özge, and to others who mentioned COP that is currently ongoing. Please, those of you who are there, those of you who are in touch with colleagues who are there, please make sure that this topic is also discussed and that we see some thick momentum. And then we will also see perhaps how we can build on this webinar and see what else we can do to unwrap this topic a bit more, because we had so many rich discussions and presentations especially, so maybe we can go into details. And Sabine, maybe, yes, any concluding remarks from your side as well?
Thank you very much, Elena and colleagues, for all the presentations and everything you have prepared. I just also wanted to join in on the last points on the COP. So if you have colleagues who are at the COP, please invite them tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 14th. At 1400 at 2 o'clock, there is going to be a side event at the Uzbekistan pavilion, which is dedicated to the RLC disaster. It has not come up as a specific issue so much in the presentations, but I think it is one area where women and men are both very much, affected by all this ecological catastrophe. And we are trying to, shine a light on this again. There is the RLC Trust Fund, which was created by President Mirziyoyev and our SG back in 2018. It's coming to an end by the end of this year, the first cycle, and we are looking into a second cycle. So I just wanted to mention this as well, because I think this could also be an opportunity. If you have colleagues at the COP who are interested, they're very much invited to the Uzbekistan pavilion also tomorrow. And I would like to thank you all for preparing the presentations. I've had some calls already from UNCT members in the meantime, so they're asking for the recording as well. So we will share this with the entire country team then. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity of really focusing on Uzbekistan on this important topic. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks again for the initiative. And so we're almost having like a side event at the COP while not all of us are there. That's good as well. Let's keep the momentum going. So with that, I think maybe we can close. As I said, we see this as an opportunity to continue the discussions on the topic of gender in climate change and water-related issues. So please, if you do have any follow-up ideas, let us know. I see there was a hand. But yeah, maybe if you have any ideas, please do let us know. You have our contacts, and we'll share also all the information, and we can see what else we can plan in the future from the IBC side or from all the agencies that are present here. All right, with that, Soma, yes, you want to...
Sorry, my hand isn't working. We're all closing, and it's been brilliant to hear everybody. I did just want to flag one project which might be great for Sabine, Marco, and others to know about. Myself and other colleagues here are working on a Central Asia water-land nexus project financed by the GEF, which has a very strong gender component, and Uzbekistan, as well as other countries, are taking part in this. And here, I will share details later, but really, I think here in this project, what we're trying to do is to highlight women's role as change agents, because sustainable, soil and water management, the sort of work that women do, agrobiodiversity, all of these things are extremely important for SDG 6.2 point something. It's about keeping water in the soil basically, and avoiding water removal from the system, from the ecosystems. So women are very, very important change agents, and if we invest in women's knowledge, in these areas, sustainable soil management and technologies, it's actually really good for the environment. So it's a sort of smart investment. So I just wanted to end on that up. Thank you.
No, thanks
for your time.
Thanks so much for sharing. And maybe others, if you think about other projects you'd like to share, just send us some information and maybe we can find a way to compile more examples and share with everybody. Thanks a lot. And thanks to everybody. Have a good evening, good afternoon. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Yes.